out into the real world and have sort of like independence, but still be close to their family for support. Boomers and tenants, this other idea of older generations going into retirement and being able to, you know, downsize and maybe live in the laneway house and then rent the bigger house for sort of passive income to supplement their retirement. So young families and tenants, tenancies being, you know, the way of sort of providing that passive income for a young family. So young family and parents, same sort of thing. We have an example of that in our case studies I'm going to show. So, you know, having sort of a multi-generational living scenario. And then the idea of small businesses. This one's pretty cool. The idea of the cottage industry, like the garage being kind of like the birthplace for small businesses quite often. So this idea of woodwork is another thing that laneway housing can do. And here's kind of just like a really quick roadmap. So laneway housing is kind of complex when it comes to implementing on existing properties. Basically, you have to run all your utilities from the primary dwelling. So that's quite often one of the challenges, because it can happen in a variety of different ways, depending on where things like your sewage and your water supply is coming from. Quite often it's from the main street, sometimes from the alley. So like figuring how to tie those things in. And then also working around the existing house is quite often quite a complex thing. Sometimes we'll keep trench along the side yard if there's enough room, or we'll tie into the basement, through the basement. So you don't actually have to like start and tie into the city main. You actually just key into the house and its main line. And then groundwork is another big thing that's pretty complex, just because you're having to deal with an existing property that has a backyard and there's not so much room for construction. Things like where do you put your backfill? You basically have to take it away and put it back, bring it back. So basically, laneway housing is kind of expensive. Quite often people think it's like a fancy product, but it's actually just a small house. So it has all the same things and complexities that a house does. It's just smaller. So the economy of scale basically means it's going to be more expensive per square foot to build. So we're just really smart about spatial arrangement and use of space. So with laneway housing, there's always these opportunities to really think about space differently. In this example, you'll see this in one of our case studies. This is a nice drawing of it. That sort of, is there a point, like a finger on this thing? Okay. Oh, there it is, yeah. So this thing here, this little block here, we treat it as kind of like the service block. So that's where like all your deep utilities come in. It services the kitchen, the bathroom, the laundry room, and that's all consolidated into like one block. And it also acts as like a spatial divider between like the public space and the private space. And then it also allows for kind of like a little loft space that is actually kind of a cool little like play space for the grandchildren. So this is, we'll get into the details of this, but basically really thinking about volume instead of square footage, and like thinking about space on a plane. You think about it as a volume, right? So that really affects your perception of space and like making space feel bigger than it actually is. So we really think about laneway housing very differently than we would typically. Just thinking about how you can maximize both the feeling of space, but the versatility and usability of space. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the Withrow house. So you might see this house if you're ever driving down Memorial. It's got this kind of brick wall with like vines growing on it and some trees, and you get a little peek through like an iron gate. And so this was our very first project. And we basically bought it ourselves as our own development and said, hey, let's like make a really good example of laneway housing to like show the city what the potential is for laneway housing. And to show like, and the neighbors really, really appreciated it, because it's like, there was all these infills happening along the street, and then this house was designated as a historic resource, so it meant it couldn't be torn down. So all the developers were just passing it by and saying, you know, we're not gonna buy that house. So the previous owner valued her house so much that she put a bylaw in place to make sure that this house couldn't be torn down, and it actually devalued the property. And for us, we saw the potential for a laneway house here, because we had to keep the house, and then we also wanted to like densify and create more housing. So laneway housing was a really good option for this. So we basically learned all about heritage, what designation means, the opportunities with designation, and also we got to create a really awesome laneway house behind this house. So this is just the interior of the withrow. So we went through like a pretty deep dive into like what it takes to preserve and restore original doors, unveiling some of the really old craft that is a lost art, like lath and plaster. Nobody does it anymore. It's a beautiful thing. And also exposing like this was a brick chimney that was behind a wall, and so we just found ways to like bring out these characteristics of this historic house, and so that's the interior after we were done. We converted this from like a little sort of entry vestibule into like a sunroom entry because it's south facing, so tons of light in there for plants. We uncovered this beam that was there and just exposed it. We also uncovered all this strap ceiling that was under like a drop ceiling. So we just like really reimagined this house, and so this is it here, and that's the laneway house that we did behind it. And here's a section, so just showing just how these two houses kind of work from Memorial, which is over here. There's that brick wall. We used to have a sauna there. Now it's at my house, thank God, because I love sauna. And then this is the alley. So kind of a cross section showing like how we've taken a single family home, and we actually did a basement suite, primary suite, and then a laneway house. So we basically turned it into 3 dwellings, while maintaining the heritage house, which I think is a huge value in maintaining and preserving the characteristics of the neighborhood. And this is the laneway house, so it's really cool. 3-car garage, and then this is kind of an interesting sort of landscape move that we did, where we kind of thought about massing as a way of defining an outdoor courtyard that is very versatile, as a usable sort of amenity space. Like you can have, you know, a table out there, have some meals, or just like a little gathering there. And then, but also when you need an extra like guest parking stall, this can be used as parking. So we use these permeable pavers so that it's kind of like in that in between where it's like parking, but it's also when there's not a car, it's usable as like a really nice amenity space. And then also another thing that we've always kind of like really think about with laneway housing is putting the front door facing the alley. That way there's, we're really thinking about the laneway as like a really usable sort of streetscape. And so by putting the door facing the alley, it allows the person that lives here to kind of take ownership of the alley. And that's the way that we think that you can really convert a laneway into like a pedestrian-friendly, bike-friendly place, as if somebody treats it as their street that their house faces onto. And so that just allows it so that, you know, people will put a garden or put some plants out there and just like make it feel like a real street rather than like a service space. There's some other views of it. So really think about the roof line, bringing it down so that it's not sort of like a double height space, and more in context with the alley. So this here is like, this sidewall is probably about 6.5 feet, as opposed to being like a full 8 feet plus your roof assembly, which would make this kind of a towering structure. So really thinking about context and making sure it's not like overwhelming to the neighborhood. There's the layout. So this is that kind of like little entry courtyard. This is your sort of entry space. Another really kind of cool way of using space. This is all considered circulation. So like this is a landing that is typically counted as circulation, which doesn't count to your like limitation of, it's about 850 square feet that you can push a laneway house. So we really thought about like a landing as an actual room, and this became an office. So it's not only a landing for like turning the stairs, but you can stop and actually occupy the space and use it as a home office, which is really valuable. And then you come up the stairs, and this is kind of your living space here. So living, dining, kitchen, which is a really flexible space. I'll show you in some pictures. And then 2 bedrooms. We actually managed to get 2.5 bathrooms in here, which is kind of crazy. So 2 full en-suites and then this little powder room. Mostly with Matt. Matt basically lived in this house when we first built it, and he really likes to have multiple toilets for all his needs. So that's basically how we did that. It really worked out well because above this is a really cool little loft space that you'll see some pictures here. So it's a really like functional living space, and like in plan you can see we like thought about it as like this is public space, this is private, and it's divided by this sort of middle dividing wall, which is also where the structure sits. Basically, it's a ridge beam that has rafters that allow for the lofting of the entire space. Again, thinking about volume, like this had a flat roof, this space would feel a lot smaller than it is. This wall is really cool. Also, that's Matt's dog, Spencer. We also incorporated a little dog house into the millwork. So on the back side of this wall is a closet, like a little built-in sort of piece of millwork there. So the door is there, and so there's a little door that comes into the bedroom, so he can kind of come and go as he wishes. But it's a little dog den, basically. We're really into animal architecture too, pet architecture. And then also another thing that's really cool is really making this like versatile, usable space. So normally it's a 4-person table, but you can like basically fold out this leaf and push these table or these seats back, and then you can have, you know, guests over for dinners. It basically accommodates 8 people when that leaf is out, but when it's commonly not used, which is most of the time, they're, you know, small family could make use of a 4-person table, and then this becomes just like a really nice little leaf waterfall. There's the little office space that's on this landing. And we also did some like kind of fun details, like this is like metal mesh that's the railing, but it also serves as an armature for vines to grow. And then here, like thinking about views and privacy, we did these little planter ledges. Here you can see there, where you can basically plant anything you want, like herbs or anything that you can service from the window of the bedrooms. There's one of these in each bedroom. So there's like plants that grow and provide that privacy. And then also the plants act as kind of like a cropping device for like just cropping out the alley and like really paying more attention to the canopies of the surrounding trees. That's a view from the loft. Hope I have a picture. Here we go. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. It's like a little ladder. Again, we built this when we were like bachelors, and we were thinking that this would be like where our buddies would crash after a night at the bar, kind of thing. Or like your friends, like your kids could come and drink, or not drink. Maybe when they're teenagers, they would. But when your kids have friends over, it's kind of a cool little play space up there. It's like it's room for like a queen bed up there, and there's carpet. So it's a really cool little space that, again, this doesn't count towards your overall square footage, which really made this a really usable space. And then another cool thing about it is that this is a stud wall. It's structural, and to make use of that stud space, because it's like a 2x10 wall, we really programmed that wall to serve both sides. So you'll see up here, there's interior windows that allow the south light to come through that wall and into the bedrooms. So really like maximizing light is a big thing. And then also like this is a little sort of nook niche for a TV. And again, doghouse, little niches for little decorations, a little niche there for like your keys when you come home, and for books, and then also there's a niche for a pantry. And then here's another cool picture of that screen sort of layout that I'm going from. We also, again, because it was our own development, we really went all out and put a fire pull in. Just for, you know, quick in and out. I guess mostly when you're leaving. And then there's an example of how the vine's growing on that. So anyways, that's basically, that's a really important project for us because that kind of set the stage for our practice and like made a really good example for laneway housing in Calgary basically and showed like what it can be. This was our very first client that was not a friend or a family member. And they basically came to us and said, hey, like, we have our parents, they're aging, they could buy a condo, you know, for like $200,000-300,000, but we want them to live closer to us so that for one, they can be really close with their grandchildren. For two, we can look out for them, make sure their, you know, their health is in good order, and they can share meals together. And so that was really their priority. And they lived in West Hillhurst, had this really beautiful corner lot. And so they hired us to design and build a laneway house for them. So this is basically it. It's a really cool bungalow that has the loft. It was that drawing I showed you earlier. So this is it on site. So this is the original house here. And this is the laneway house. And this is the deck on top of the garage. They're really into gardening, and same with the grandma. She was really into gardening. So the deck space, as well as this little corner lot here, accommodated a lot of gardening. And the whole idea was that we had to make sure that this was accessible because the grandfather was losing his mobility. So he was in a walker, and then eventually he moved to a wheelchair. So we made sure that it was fully accessible with you know, barrier-free doors, ramps for access, and all their needs were served on the ground level. That was really important. This is a picture of the framed ceiling, kind of viewed from the little loft space that became kind of like the play space for the grandchildren. Again, here's that diagram I kind of already talked through, but basically this is the service core, and then there's stairs that come up, and that's where the little play space is, and then there's these dormers that allow one more usable headspace on this service block, and then this one is a door that allowed for access onto the rooftop garden. And then here again, this kind of shows programmatically how this block works. So kitchen backs onto it. This is the bathroom. Oh, sorry, this is the bathroom. This is kind of the service space. This layout actually kind of changed a little bit, but the general idea, the gist of it is this is like where all your services come in, and it also allows for this division of public space and private space. So that's a picture from the street. Again, this is the ramp that brings you to the front door. And here, over here is where the garage is. So that's a picture of that dormer that is above, that's for that loft space where the kids' play space is. And that's me. This is like a really cool posing for the picture. This is a little net structure for the kids. Really awesome. This is where they like come and read, and like great place to play for the kids. Kind of taking advantage of that sort of double height space that was in this hallway that is used for accessing the bedrooms that are over here. Again, there's me. I'm usually the model in all these pictures. My younger days. Okay, so this is the third. How are we doing on time?
What is it? 12:24. Are you right on that?
Am I okay? Because we have till 1?
12:50.
12:50.
So it can be done in
Okay,
14 minutes and then 10 minutes.
Perfect. Okay, we're doing it. This one is in Crescent Heights. The owner is she's retired. She actually, like, her idea was that she was going to build a laneway house for her daughter to live in, and from the time we just started designing to the point where we had it finished construction. Her daughter met her husband, they moved into their own house, and then it became a rental, basically, which was the idea the whole time, but it became an opportunity for myself to move in instead of her daughter, which was pretty cool, because I got to live in this Lame house and really kind of experience some of the design moves that we're making. But her ambition was like, she was really seeing a lot of, like this house doesn't exist anymore, same with the one beside her. She's seen a lot of development happening, and you know, she loved her heritage house. It's not designated, but it's, like this house won't be torn down because this Lame house exists, basically. So, she just really wanted to try to be like an advocate for preserving the streetscape and like making sure her house lived a longer life, because, you know, end of the day, these houses are built with like old growth fir, and they're like built really, really well with materials that you can't get anymore. And so this house got a new lease on life because of the Lame house. But she really wanted to like, she had a really cool property, as you can see. The back is a bowling lane, lawn bowling green. No, this is Custom Heights. Yeah. So basically, like right when you come, if you ever want to go see it, you're coming up Center Street, and it's your first right onto 7th Ave, and that's where it is basically. So myself and my wife, well at the time fiance, we moved into this and lived there for 2 years. And you know, during that time, we like watched a lot of lawn bowling. And then actually became part like members, and it was pretty fun. Like you just sit out here and just have a drink and just like watch. Like it was amazing. And then also there's a really amazing city view, like from this balcony. It's like this because it's on the top of the bluff, basically. You have a downtown view. So here's a drawing. This one's really cool because the other thing about the client is that she's big into gardening, and the unique thing about her backyard is that she has a designated heritage mountain ash tree, which is like one of the most beautiful trees I've ever seen in the city. I think you'll see a picture. But basically this tree was like a big influence on how we went about designing the Lame house. It's really long and linear, I mean, which plays into the name of it, is the bowling lane house. Not just because it's adjacent to the lawn bowling. So it had this existing front drive garage, which was also like a unique condition, because typically this isn't allowed unless it's there already. Like the city doesn't let you typically have a front drive on your property. So we really took advantage of that and made this the access point for the garage. And by doing that, we were able to like really think about the front facade as like living space facing the alleyway, as opposed to it being like on top of a garage. And so that was a really unique site characteristic that we played into, and also having these kind of two double-sided balconies. And then we really thought about this central space as a way of like opening up and creating this sort of indoor-outdoor scenario that really made the garden feel like it was part of the space, and also like made this tree an important aspect of what it's like to live in this space. There it is from the alley. I wish we still had that car. That was our vanity car when we were younger, and her name was Sally.
Is that an MG?
It's MG, yeah. It was fun to drive for sure, but we don't have anymore.
Dale
So,
Taylor parked his in his office.
what's that?
Dale Taylor parked his in his office.
Oh, did he?
Or Barry Johnson.
Oh, very good. Okay, so another cool thing about this, we integrated evacuated solar tubes. We had to fight to like make sure they didn't end up onto the facade. This is direct south facing, so we designed it so that it was incorporated into the fence, which was interesting. And basically, this is a preheat for the boiler. So the way it works is it's like it has a a solar tank associated with it, so it heats up water, and then it pumps that hot water into a giant solar tank that is sort of the preheater for the water that goes to the boiler, and then the boiler feeds the hydronic heat in the concrete floor. So the way we also did this house because of this tree is that we did screw piles as opposed to 4-foot frost walls as a way of like making sure we weren't going to mess with the roots of the tree. Just because it's less invasive, you're basically, I don't know if you guys know what screw piles are, but you're basically just screwing these big posts into the ground until they get to a certain torque, and that allows you to basically pour like a thickened slab, and so you're not really doing a whole lot of excavation, and it's a really good way to go about foundations, and it also allows you to have a big slab that is below like where your living space is, so you can have that heated, and radiant floors are just really nice. The other cool thing about this is that in the summer, these trees, like once they get their leaves, and then also when they start to get their berries, the canopy kind of like slouches over the evacuated solar tubes, and doesn't provide as much solar gain from the sun. And in the winter, they kind of rise and then they do full exposure, so that these solar tubes are like running full tilt in the winter, and that's when you actually need the heat. So in a way, the tree is kind of like a cool supplement, and like it kind of works with the solar tubes. So this is the inside. Again, we use a similar technique with the leaf, so that you can expand and contract your dining space. There's a really cool little powder room that we incorporated under the stairs. These are kind of the big sliders that open up into the garden and give you that big view to the mountain ash tree. And then these are like double height glass windows. So that's it from the backyard, and that's the canopy of the mountain ash tree.
Is there a garage off to the left in that little black box?
Yeah, that's where the garage is basically. Actually, directly behind this is where that's the utility room. So that's where all the solar tank is, your boiler, electrical panel, all that's in there. And then that's the balcony to sit and hang out and watch the boiler. And so yeah, so through this window, that's the big downtown view. You can kind of see the hotel there. The other really cool thing about this is because there's no garage that's on the alley, we push the kitchen right up against the alleyway. And so like you're washing dishes, you're like, making dinner, and you basically, like, people are coming up and down this alley because it's paved, it's a pedestrian thoroughfare. You get to really know your neighbors. Like, people are walking and they see you in the window and you just say hi. And we also have 2 cats, and they would always just sit up here, and so everybody knew our cats. So it just goes to show how like design can really influence how you interact and integrate into your community. Like, this is a really nice way to do it because it's like becomes a public space in a way, and it has this really interesting relationship with the alley. And then behind the screen, I don't know if that is a Murphy bed that when it's up, it's a office, and when it's down, it's kind of like your guest bedroom. Because this one, basically over here is your bedroom, and then over here is where that Murphy bed is. And the house has like a bridge, which is really cool right here. That bridges between this space and the bedroom. Again, it's about volume. This is a double height space that basically goes all the way up, and that's where your dining and your living space is. And this is the stairs that come up. Okay, and then this is the last one. This is about multi-generational living. So the story behind this one is the clients, they were retired, and they basically wanted this house to be their last house. It's like the last house where they want to die, basically. It's like they want to be able to live in this house until their last breaths, basically. So, but when they commissioned us to design it, totally mobile, you know, they were in their 60s, but they're just anticipating, and they wanted this house to really like serve their future needs. And it's a really kind of fun design prompt because you have to think about like, okay, this is them now, but also what are they gonna be like in 20, 30 years, and what are those needs gonna be? So this house had to serve them for a long time, and so we had to think about it as a way, like, how can this house transform and serve their needs? So that's their house, and then the laneway house is where their son lives with his fiance. So again, multi-generational living, like having their family close so that they can have those meals together and just like be supportive of each other. So interdependency is the word I'm looking for. So this is a section through it. The other thing we love to do is solariums because Calgary has a ton of light all year round. And so even in the winter, this place is green and lush. Like these plants are all, this is a fig tree, this is a lemon tree. So it's kind of a subtropical climate because it's kind of indoor but outdoor. And it gets a lot of solar gain because we use these. If you want to look into it, it's called Galena. It's a really nice product that like industrial greenhouses use, and it has like an insulative value, but it also lets in a ton of light. So that's what we typically use for our solariums. Again, like this idea that you could really open this up so that this kind of expands your indoor space. So these doors open up and really make this like kind of expanded space to your house. But in the winter you can close it down and this becomes a little bit more isolated. And the other thing too for them was like this idea of nurturing, like as they grow older, having this space where they can nurture plants and having that part of their day-to-day was really important to their well-being. And then also down here, they're big into flamingo dancing. Flamenco, that's flamingo. Anyway, so downstairs is kind of like their dance space. And then there's a cold room for all basically the wife, she was big into canning, so the things she grows in here, she cans and puts into the cold space in the basement. Again, so this is, the last name is Door, so it became known as the Dooryard, as opposed to the courtyard. So that's where the family would get together for gatherings. There's a nice marketing space and some like canopied areas. So this is the main house, backyard suite, and basically solar array that provides power for both dwellings. Again, aging in place, anticipating their needs as they grow older. This is a ramp that brings you right to the front door and basically provides access no matter how, however you move, basically you can access this house. Okay, so this is a cool idea around transformation. So this house currently has this millwork, but down the road we designed it such that there's this basically this I-beam, a steel I-beam that supports the vanity top. So if and when the time came that they need wheelchair access, this can just easily come out, like these cabinets, these under counter cabinets can easily just be pulled out. So it actually is like aesthetically quite pleasing as well because it kind of creates this reveal line, but these are not, like this is not dependent on this, is basically what we did there. So easily transforms into a wheelchair accessible house. Again, this idea of entry, being able to sit, put your shoes on, but having like a really nice entry where it's plenty of room for if you have a wheelchair or a walker, and just like a nice place to welcome people into your home. So this is the main house entry into the house, and then this is the door to the solarium. Again, this solarium, so that's looking through this the solarium to front door. There's some exterior shots. So we also did a solarium on the layman house, which is cool. This again, we did the office on the landing, which you'll see. So this is the layman house. So this is the solarium in the layman house. It's much more of like a lounge space that also has, you can see the little edge of it. There's a really cool 8-quart stove there that provides supplemental heat. Like when it gets to -30, you have to provide a little bit of supplemental heat for these spaces because it's not quite enough to go just by solar gain. And so this is a really cool space that has perimeter planting, a little place for hanging out. And then like again, laneway housing, like maximizing storage means if the budget's there, you can do really cool built-ins for storage. So that's what this is all about. And also a ladder, again, using that same technique, doing a little loft space. The client, he's big and he's kind of an audiophile, so he has a huge record collection. And so this is his listening room. So when he wants to go out and chill, he just goes up there and listens to records. There's a big skylight there as well. It's the kitchen. Again, it doesn't show it, but there's a leaf that expands the dining table. Here again, there's the landing office, home office, right there. This is the listening loft I was telling you about. So there's like these really cool opportunities to create these nooks, which awesome for adults, but really great for kids as well, because I feel like we always kind of forget about the scale of kids and the spaces that fit them. And so I don't know if you guys, when you were kids, you looked for those like under the stairs spaces or like, you know, creating spaces that felt right to your scale. And so we really like to think about that, and this is a great space for it. Okay, so that's that. So those are the layman houses. Yeah, okay. Oh yeah, we're almost there.
Oh, yeah.
I should stop now, it's 12:42. And then this is what's next. We're doing this really cool multi-development, multi-family in Sunnyside that we're developing ourselves. Again, it's really incorporating a lot of these ideas that layman housing has. This idea of like multi-generational living, giving place, accessible dwellings at the ground level, diversity, thinking about families on these upper levels, and you know, elderly and students and mobility compared for the ground levels. So that's something that's actually being built now. I showed this last year and we were still in development permit phase, and now it's being built. So look out for that. And that's it.
So we never just want to present and then leave. We want to leave you guys an opportunity. So we have about 6 minutes left. If you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, Abby?
For like this one especially, because they're getting older, like is there any solution for like the fact that maybe that you have to use a ladder to get to, or the fact that there's like so many stairs? Is like there room for like one of those robot chair things?
Yeah, so the layman house wasn't designed for aging in place. It's more the primary house that was for aging in place. And yeah, so the layman house, like they anticipate that their son is eventually going to move and have a family, and so down the road it could potentially become like an au pair suite or a rental for supplemental income. So yeah, to answer your question, this isn't really designed for accessibility. It's more so the main dwelling.
Any other questions? Well,
with the laneway house, you're already constrained on space. How do you approach your redesign intelligently?
That's always a challenge. Quite often, what we'll do, like thinking about this, like anticipation of mobility issues, we'll rough in like an elevator shaft that can be used in other ways, like for storage or things like that, until the time comes where you need an elevator, and then it's just as simple as like, hey, you know, elevator contractor, we have the space, you just come and sit in. So, you know, you can do things like that. The one that I showed you here, like that one, this one, this one, was a corner lot, huge backyard, 50 foot by 120. Had this opportunity definitely grown. Like when we first moved here, there's a lot of pushback and NIMBYism, because they're rightfully so, because when we started, there was developers that were building these boxes that were just monstrosities, and people were like, this shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to like counter that with like doing contextual, sensitive development that really made sense for each specific site. And so since then, the city has put in design guidelines that say, okay, you have to have like a roof that descends towards the alley and towards the backyard, as well as to your side yard. So, and like things like guidance on where you should put amenity spaces and things like that, and overlooking and window placement, all those things have been kind of really put more into rules, bylaws set by the city. So we're seeing like better laneway housing now. But to answer your question, definitely like same, like I think it's grown for sure. The thing that always kind of undoes it for people is the cost, because it's always surprisingly expensive to build laneway. Like these, when we first, this one was probably the cheapest one we ever did, and it was back in 2016, so things have really changed. But we did this one for $350,000, and now you can expect like 500, 550 for construction.
Would you mind spelling Galena?
Oh yeah, Gallina. Yeah.
I was wondering, so you mentioned earlier hack in the foyer
Yeah.
space. Do you have any other big hacks for living house?
Ooh.
So that was a good hack because it was 2 stories. So the stair, when you go to the 2nd story, doesn't count. So you guys can't hack that.
Are you talking about like the office space on the landing?
Yeah,
Is
just
that
like
what
in
you're talking
general, when you see a state, like you have found kind of that loophole.
Yeah, for sure.
What other?
Well, the other one is like thinking about like what would be attic space typically, like when you vault the space. That gives you all this sort of airspace, right? So, where is the picture? I mean, this is a good example, but that's still counted towards livable space. But like the one that is, the one in the Withrow laneway house, basically have the bathrooms, and the bathrooms really just need like 7 feet head height. It's not really where you really value head height. So what we do is drop the ceiling there, and then that creates this opportunity to create a floor, and also take advantage of that airspace as a loft. And that space is called storage, so it doesn't count towards your livable space. As long as it's accessed by like a removable ladder or stair, you can call it storage. So, but then like it's a private space. I'd probably not be telling you these things because it's against the code. If like, I guess if a bylaw guy can give us trouble, but nobody really does. It's not something that people really get upset about, so. Yeah.
One more question.
Up there.
How do you keep the laneway houses cost efficient?
How do you make them more cost efficient?
Yeah.
Well, creative use of like conventional materials, like plywood. How can you use plywood in like a creative way? It's quite often a thing we think about. You know, it's tough. Like to be honest, like we're really design oriented, and so like not to say budget isn't a thing, but what we're trying to do is create really good housing that's well built, crafted well. And here's the thing, sustainability. I really believe in design as a means of achieving sustainability. Because like, you could build this spacecraft that has all the technology you want, but if it's a crappy place to live, that house is probably gonna be torn down. It's like nobody wants to be there, right? So if you build something that's like really well designed, that feels good, has like a humanistic quality to it, it's not something, it doesn't feel alienating, and it feels like something that's like really serving your needs and your life, that house is gonna last for ages, you know? And that's like that's why we like heritage houses, because they're built that way, right? My problem with today's world is like housing isn't treated as a commodity, you know? It's like these are investments, like how much square footage can I get and what's the payoff? You know, for me it's like, these are humans living in these places, right? And so, I just want to challenge that thing. And I think laneway housing does a really good job of that. Yeah.
I think we're up against it for time. I'd love to ask more questions, but before that, just a quick little story. So, 2 years ago, this lovely a really nice young lady named Kyla sat in this audience. Was really inspired by Mark. Her name was Chai. A year later, I hired her. She worked for me, but she was always so inspired by Mark's talk that she always wanted to work for them. During her capstone, she went and worked for them, and now they hired her. So those things do happen, and she's never really forgotten, the things that Mark said, and even Sydney today in third semester. Hopefully, he kind of inspires some design creativity and some thoughtfulness and fun, stuff like that with the architecture. And I want to work for him too. So as I walk him to his car, I said last year, "Do you guys ever need an architect?" He goes, "Yeah, sometimes we do." I go, "I'm an architect," and he went, "You are." and we did a job sort of together. Sort of. We started to work together. That one he showed you at the end, we consulted with some people about it and kind of did a few things together. So yeah, sometimes small doors lead to big rooms. Hopefully you're inspired to do more creative, not super complicated, but creative, thoughtful, humanistic laneway house for your project. Thanks so much. All right. So 5 minutes, grab some chips and drink on the way out. We'll see you guys live.
Wait, we're gonna be here, right, for our lecture? Yeah, we're here, right? Okay. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Are we moving? Oh, we're not here. So wait, I can have to I'm waiting over here.
Clear out the other closet. 7 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Let's look around.